It's football season and time for the show that examines the X's and O's, the top games for the coming weekend. It's time for the Gridiron Breakdown.
It's time for the Gridiron Breakdown. I'm Jay.
And I'm Alan.
And we are here to get ready for the 2018 college football season. It's time for our conference preview set. And Alan, man, I am pumped about this. I don't know about you. We're going to talk about some Pac-12 football tonight, man. And, we don't get to talk about the Pac-12 a ton, being Southern guys. That's definitely after dark football for us. But there's some good football in the Pac-12 in spite of that really shoddy bowl record that they finished the season with. And that's got to be addressed, all right? It went 1-8 in bowls, but there's another side to that. 9 of the 12 teams made a bowl game.
The 1-8 bowl record, bowl records, I don't know how great a barometer is. Sometimes you just get really bad matchups. But, Jay, they only had 2 teams win double-digit games last year.
Yeah, they did. They Washington and USC were the double-digit winners last year. They had only had one double-digit loser, though, and that was Oregon State. You can look at it a couple different ways. Bowl season nowadays, particularly because of the way the playoffs are done, I kind of think it's just sort of whatever. If these guys are up for it, they are. If they're not, they're not. And some of them were in some pretty prime games, but Oregon played Boise State pretty good. That was the Las Vegas Bowl. The bigger bowls they were in, the Cotton Bowl, USC didn't look great against Ohio State. Washington fought against Penn State pretty hard. They just couldn't handle Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Washington has been very consistent over the past couple of years. USC's been a little they've had some good years, they've had some down years probably over the last 5 or 6 years. But nobody else in that conference really stepped up. There are so many bowl games now, Jay, and almost everybody goes to one. And unfortunately, the playoff has kind of made it, if you're not in one of those playoffs, who really cares? And I think some of the players have done that, and I think a lot of those guys, if they're going to, a mediocre bowl, why do I want to kill myself for that? I need to get myself ready for the combine.
Well, that's true, and that may be the way a lot of them operate. But that was last year. And so as we turn our attention to this year, there's some exciting players individually, and I think some pretty exciting teams in this Pac-12 bunch. And so I just want to do a quick review. We're going to start with the Pac-12 North. Last year, the North Division finished with Stanford, Washington, Washington State, Oregon, Cal, and Oregon State. All right? So, not terribly surprising, right? Stanford ended up winning that thing with a 7-2 record. They had the tiebreaker over Washington, but even though they had a worse overall record. But Washington State ended up finishing 6-3. Then after that, it was kind of down. Cal and Oregon State did not have winning teams. Oregon barely got in there with 7-5, ended up losing their bowl game, finishing 7-6. Their coach is gone now, so you got a brand new coach at Oregon in Mario Cristobal, which I know he was there before, but he's moving up. But they retained Jim Leavitt before. You've got Jonathan Smith coming over from Washington to take over Oregon State. Then everywhere else remains the same. They keep the coaching staffs in place. Chris Peterson at Washington, David Shaw's group at Stanford, Mike Leach and his wild group at Washington State, though they lost Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator, and then Justin Wilcox's group at Cal. So there's a lot of consistency still on the Pac-12 North side of the ball. And I'm going to kind of throw it to you now. How do you see the Pac-12 North working out, and what do you make of the teams this year?
Well, to be honest, the way I see the Pac-12 North, there are 2 teams that are better than everybody else, and that being Washington and Stanford. And a lot of the other teams have question marks. Cal, they were 5-7 last year. They're showing improvement under Wilcox, so he seems to have them going in the right direction. Washington State, who's had a decent couple of years, the last couple of years, I got a feeling they're going to take a step back. I think they've lost a lot off that team, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to keep the momentum going. Oregon, the real question is, how is Cristobal going to handle that? They've got a great quarterback. They've got some good offensive linemen. Leavitt, he's got that defense playing better. My question is, how does Cristobal manage that? And Jay, I'll mention Oregon State, but they were just terrible last year, 1-11, 0-9 in the conference. And I don't know if they're going to be a whole lot better this year.
They very well may not be. And you mentioned Jim Levitt at Oregon. Like, it can't be understated. Like, they jumped up something like 40 or 50 spots in defensive ranking from where they were. Now, they were still in like the 60s, so they weren't great, but they were in the hundreds when he took them over. So that's a lot of work in just one season for him with the Ducks. But it's time to start making picks, man. And so tell me how you see the Pac-12 North finishing.
Well, the Pac-12 North, I'll just start at the top. I think Washington will win the division. They have Jake Browning, the senior quarterback. They have Myles Gaskin coming back. They have two upperclassmen tackles. And they got a defense that's been spot on for the past couple of years, and I don't see that defense taking too huge of a hit. And they're set for a prime season. I think their toughest games are obviously the opener against Auburn. I think that while it's not a must-win for Washington, I think if they lose that, they cannot afford to stumble anywhere else and still have a hope at the playoffs. I think they are the class of that division. I think they are head and shoulders above everybody else there. Next, coming in, I will have the Stanford Cardinals. I think Bryce Love, who is a phenomenal player, a guy who probably should have won the Heisman last year, but he plays way too many games after everybody on this half of the country goes to bed. Their quarterback play, it was so-so at times last year, but they're hoping that they can take a step forward this year. I know they won the division last year, but let's be honest, that team was Bryce Love and a solid defense, and that was about it. Now, I will say this. Last year, Stanford's defense gave up 170 yards on the ground a game. That's not good. The offense should be better than it was last year. KJ Costello should take a step forward. They got some solid offensive linemen, and I think they're just going to be a little bit better than Oregon. And that's why I put them 2. I have Oregon finishing 3. I know that's kind of a roll of the dice there to see how Cristobal does, but they've got solid quarterback play, a decent offensive line. That defense, like we said, it jumped up tremendously from last year. And I think the big thing is Oregon also has a favorable schedule. They avoid USC out of the South, and they get Washington and Stanford at home. So there's a chance there for them maybe to pick somebody off. And then going down the list, I think Cal will actually finish 4th. I think Cal will probably make a bowl game. I like what Wilcox is doing. I think they're on the rise. 5th, I have Washington State. I think they're going to take a big step back. They lose Luke Falk. And, is it just me, or does it seem like Mike Leach is just kind of losing control? Maybe that's just him all the time. And I will say this, Oregon State's not going to be much better. They have a brutal schedule. I'll get to more on that later when we talk about our toughest stretches of the season for this conference. But, I don't understand. When Mike Riley was there, it seemed like, Oregon State was a solid 8-win team. But they have just cratered. They're just bad, Jay. We got to start throwing Oregon State in the conversation with Rutgers and Kansas for the worst Power 5 team out there.
Yeah, it would be a hard stretch. They are not good. There's a lot of hope, again, with Jonathan Smith coming in. Maybe he picked up some stuff working with Peterson as long as he did and can right the ship there. But, no, they're not very good. So, all right, so just to review, you've got it. Washington, Stanford, Oregon, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State, right? All right, so we only disagree on spots 2 and 3 because I think Washington's going to win that division too, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the country. They're returning 16 starters. All right, they got great players on the front. You mentioned their 2 tackles up front. That whole offensive line, except for the left guards coming back, including one of the tight ends. They're bringing back Myles Gaskin, their running back. Myles Gaskin only had 1,380 yards, which seems kind of pedestrian when you put it up to the 2,100 Bryce Love had. But he scored 21 touchdowns. Then you put in 39-game starter Jake Browning, who's ultra accurate, doesn't throw interceptions, plays smart within himself. Look, dude, that is going to be a really good team. They've got a good schedule. Again, opening up with Auburn, that's a tough game. They go to Utah and they go to Oregon and go to Cal. Those are their toughest road games. I know they're on the road at UCLA too. I don't think UCLA is going to be good. We'll get to that in a minute. They've got to navigate that, but they've been a good road team under Peterson. There's just so much about Washington to like. And here's the thing about them that's amazing. They are the most consistent offense, really in the country, but particularly in the Pac-12, and they're not flashy at all. They don't even really do anything all that complicated. They're just really good at executing. There's a ton to like about the Washington Huskies, so I've got Washington in my number one spot. My two-hole, man, I've got Oregon, and I want to tell you why, because Levitt made such an improvement with that defense. If Justin Herbert, that quarterback, is healthy all year, even losing to Royce Freeman, that is going to be an explosive offense again. They're going to put up points on people, and they're going to be able to stop people. And I think they're going to be able to get the drop on Stanford this year. I don't think they'll be able to beat Washington, but I think they'll be able to hang on and get over the Stanford bug. Stanford-Oregon's been one of those back-and-forth series for the last several years, going back to the Chip Kelly days. But I think Oregon's going to be able to edge them out this year because they're bringing so much back too. And Cristobal is – I loved that guy when he was at Florida International. I thought he got done wrong there. He's done nothing but continue to do well everywhere he's been. He maintained Levitt. There's a lot of consistency. They got 14 starters coming back. I like the Ducks, and their schedule's really good. They get Stanford at home, and they get them early in the season, so health shouldn't be an issue. They even get Washington at home. So, their hardest road game is at Arizona, or at Cal. Oregon's a team I'm just really digging on. Of course, that means I've got Stanford in the 3 spot. I think they're going to be good. I'm not sold on KJ Costello. I think Bryce Love's going to be amazing, but I think people are going to stack the box on him. And you brought up that you stole my statistic about how bad their defense was on the ground last year and how hurting they were on the defensive line. They've got to answer a lot of questions. I don't think they get them all answered this year. I've got Stanford third. I agree with you 4 through 6, though. I've got Cal in the 4 spot because I think Wilcox is improving. They should make a bowl game. I don't think Washington State's going to be very good this year, man. I mean, aside of the tragedy of Tyler Helinski and prayers out to his family and everything that they've gone through and his friends and teammates. But beyond that, that is a team that is starting to turn. And you mentioned Mike Leach is getting a little sideways there. I love Mike Leach, all right? I think he's an amazing coach. He's a very interesting person. He's incredibly smart. But I think he wears out his welcome in places. And this is starting to look like what happened when it ended at Texas Tech. It's just starting – there's a lot of little stuff starting to unravel. The AD that hired him is now gone. Washington State has a lot of money trouble. If they crater out, seat could get a little hot, may even get too hot for him there. So I've got Washington State 5th. I don't think Oregon State's ready to do anything yet. Good luck to Jonathan Smith. But I'll be honest with you, man, they won 1 game last year. They might win 2 this year, maybe 3. But I've got Oregon State in my last spot too. So we pretty much agree. Both of us like Washington in the Pac-12 North. And I think we would agree it's really a 2 or 3 team race. And honestly, the real race is for 2 through 4.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think Washington is heads and buns better than everybody else in that division, but funky things can happen. Injuries happen. I do like the Huskies to win that division. I mean, let's be honest. The big test for Washington starts week 1, Atlanta versus Auburn. That is their chance to make a statement, put themselves on the scene, and have everybody follow them the rest of the season.
Oh, yeah, and we're going to talk more about that game in a few weeks. I have a feeling that one might make the cut during the first week games. That might be one we got to get into. But we both see Washington winning the Pac-12 North. So we're going to do Pac-12 South next. And to be fair, I'm going to go first this time so that you don't always have to be on the hot seat. I'm going to tell you, man, I'm going to pick the Arizona Wildcats. I thought I might. That's why I wanted to go again. 17 returning starters, including one of the most electric football players out there right now, with a coach and a coaching staff that know how to deal with that. Khalil Tate, all right? Yeah, he had some turnover problems late in the season, got a little off, but he runs the ball like crazy. He gets the throwing down, and with a guy like Sumlin and Noel Mazzoni, the offensive coordinator there, with their receiving core, with J.J. Taylor stepping up at running back now, in addition to what Tate can do, they've got to fix some offensive line. They only got 2 returning offensive linemen, but the guy's stepping up. They've got a lot of hope in. But most of that defense is coming back. They got better as the season went on. I think Arizona, with a schedule setting up the way it does, has a chance to do something special. Now, I don't think they're going to be in the national title hunt, so don't get me wrong here, all right? I think they're probably going to win about 9 games is what I've got them doing, all right? But I think that's enough to win a Pac-12 South that is going to be a bunch of sharks all going around the same wounded animal. They're going to be eating each other alive. But this Khalil Tate kid is absolutely electric. I've got Arizona in the number 1 spot. The number 2 spot, I'm going to be honest with you, I went back and forth on a lot of this, and I'm going outside of the box here. I'm putting it on my man Kyle Whittingham at Utah. I think every 3 or 4 years he comes up with a year that just surprises people. And I think he's in a great position to do it this year. They won their bowl game. They ended the season strong. They're always good on defense. They've got Tyler Huntley coming in at quarterback again. He got better as the year went on. They can be a really dangerous team, especially at home, and they get a lot of tough games at home. They get SC at home. They have to go to Colorado. That's not so bad. They get Washington State on the road. That's not so bad. They drew them and Washington out of the North, so they've got to play the Apple Cup teams. But the South teams, man, line up really good for them. I don't think Arizona State's going to be a big problem for them. I like Utah in the number 2 spot. I'm going to put Southern Cal in at number 3. I think Clay Helton is a very good coach. I think he's a bit of an underrated coach, honestly, dude. But the problem is he lost all of his production. He lost his quarterback, lost his good running back. One thing coming in is Stephen Carr, the running back that's going to come in and be the starter this year, should be a good relief for whoever they have at quarterback. They've got the offensive line back except for the left tackle spot. They don't have much on the defensive line front, but SC's had good defenders. They should be good. They're just not going to be great, but I think they're going to be good. I've got Colorado in my 4th spot. I think it's starting to get to the point where they need to start getting better and getting significantly better. I don't think going 5-7 again is going to sit real well in Boulder with everybody. And I think they can get to 6-6 this year. They're going to have to nip and tuck, but they've got a great quarterback too. Steven Montez is a big guy. He's like Justin Herbert. You just don't know who he is. He's incredibly productive, puts up a lot of yards. When he's healthy, they're good. They get a decent schedule too. I've got UCLA 5th. I don't think Chip Kelly it's going to take him a while to get what he wants there, and I don't really know what it's going to look like. I mean, we all assume Chip's going to come in and do what he did at Oregon back in the day. Chip's been in the NFL for a while. He's changed the way he does things. He may not do that. So I like UCLA in 5th, though. I think they're going to steal one from somebody late in the season, but I don't think they're going to be very good early on. And then I've got Arizona State 6, man, because I think Herm Edwards is a fine human being and is a great motivator and stuff, but this experiment just looks like it could go sideways. And even with Manny Wilkins at quarterback, who I think is a great player and is also, if you know anything about his story, you need to read about him, folks. He's a fantastic dude and an interesting person to read about, but they just don't have any of the horses to hang in there. So I've got Arizona State going 6. So my rundown again before I throw it to you, I've got Arizona winning the Pac-12 South, Utah 2nd, USC 3rd, Colorado 4th, UCLA 5th, and Arizona State 6th. So I assume since I stole it from you, you're going to pick Arizona to finish first too.
Yes, Jay, I have Arizona winning the South. Khalil Tate is a phenomenal player, lots of production on the ground. He has some turnover problems. I think he can overcome that. They returned 9 starters off a defense that got better as the season went on. And to me, while I don't know that Arizona is going to be just this phenomenal team, I think the South is kind of – you got a couple of decent teams, but, nobody wants to win the division is what I kind of felt like when I was looking through this. But I think with Sumlin coming in and Noel Mazzoni, like you said, they're going to be able to get great production out of that offense and take advantage of some really shouty defenses that come along in the South. Finishing second, I almost followed you, Jay. I almost followed you down the wormhole to Utah. I think Kyle Whittingham does a great job. I love Utah. They're usually one of my danger zone picks somewhere along the season because I have faith in them. My problem with Utah, though, is their schedule. You talk about how their schedule isn't that bad. But let me just tell you this. Their cross-division opponents are Washington, Washington State, and Oregon. Do you know who USC's cross-division opponents are?
Lay it on me.
Washington State, Stanford, and Oregon State.
So what you're saying is Utah got LSU's draw and USC got Alabama's draw.
Exactly. Now I'll tell you, somebody else got done dirty in this conference. We'll talk about that later. But I think they got the easier path out of the North. They avoid having to play Washington or Oregon, two teams that traditionally have given USC trouble. They get Stanford early in the season, so maybe Stanford hadn't figured out their run defense. So, I'm not a huge Clay Helton fan, I'll be honest. I didn't like USC last year. Sam Darnold was a turnover machine, as I bemoaned that point time and time again last year. I think USC will be all right. I don't know that they're going to be great. I think they're in a bad division, to be honest. Got a lot of good home games, but I think that their crossover schedule is what pushed them ahead of Utah for me. Third, I got Utah. I love Kyle Whittingham. Utah has maybe been one of the most consistent programs over the last decade. Whittingham, they always seem to play good defense. They're able to run the ball. And, Jay, we get the Holy War back this year. So, I mean, how can that be bad? Even though BYU is just awful. But, I think the big thing for them is Utah is going to have to try to steal one along the way. They're going to have to be able to beat a Stanford or a Washington or Oregon to have any hope of taking care of this. And I just don't see – I think they'll get somebody. They'll get one of those three big ones from the North, but I don't think they'll have enough horses to go the long haul of the season. So I have them third. Finishing fourth, I went ahead and fourth, I did pick Colorado. I think that last year was a little bit of apparition. 2 years ago, they won 10 games. I think they get somewhere in between. I think they get 8 or 9 wins. I think their schedule is okay. It's not bad, but it's not just awful like Utah's schedule. Coming in fifth, I have UCLA. I think we're all curious as what the Chip Kelly experiment will look like. I don't know that we really know. I agree with you. He's learned some things in the NFL. So you may see some sort of hybrid system where he's maybe not going crazy like he did in the NFL, but somewhere in between. I mean, like he did at Oregon, but somewhere in between. And finishing last will be Arizona State. And Jay, can I just tell you, they need to go ahead and fire up the search committee again. I believe Herm Edwards will be canned after this year. I think this is a awful idea. I like Herm Edwards. I love Herm Edwards on TV. I loved him as the Jets coach. But it's been a long time since he's coached. It's been a long time since he coached in college. I think the recruiting game has passed him by, and I think they're just going to be awful. I think this was a terrible hire. And I'm not the only person. I was reading through Athlon the other day, Jay, and they have Herm Edwards on the hot seat already. So if they're willing to do that, I think they're just going to be awful.
Yeah, and to be fair, Athlon is not exactly hot take central, so that's something for them to say that. So, wow. Okay, so we both have the same division winners, Washington and Arizona, playing in the Pac-12 championship game. Which, can I just say, worst location for a championship game ever? That is a terrible place. That stadium they play at, the 49ers, Levi's, Santa Cruz, middle of dang nowhere stadium.
Well, let me stop you there.
Yeah?
That's where the national championship game will be, my friend.
I am so sorry that you're going to have to make a trip out there.
No, you couldn't pay me to go out there.
Yeah, no.
Take you 4 hours to get to the stadium.
No, I even saw it at WrestleMania from there once, and it looked bad on TV then. I'm only biding my time till the Raiders move to Las Vegas because I think that's the perfect spot. That's where they need to move this to, but I digress a little bit. But we picked two teams to be in that championship game. I want to know who you think is going to come out of this on top, and then, without revealing too much, does that team have a shot at the playoffs?
I have Washington winning, and I think they do have a shot at the playoffs. If they win the opener, I feel they can drop a conference game along the way and still make it. If they lose the opener, though, Jay, their margin for error is just non-existent. They will have to run the table and be perfect the rest of the way just because the conference isn't all that great top to bottom. Or maybe it's just a perception of the conference not being really great that'll keep them down. I think Washington does have a shot at the playoffs. They have returning 16 starters, senior quarterback, solid offensive line. They have all the tools there to make it to the playoffs.
All right. Well, I agree with you that I think Washington is going to win the conference. I think that's going to be a really interesting game when they play Arizona. You talk about fireworks that could fly in a game, man. Like that could get really fun. Particularly because they don't play each other in the regular season, so we don't get that rematch effect, right? So we're going to see what Washington's got right out of the gate. They're playing an SEC defense, and that is a good SEC defense. Oh, actually, one of the better ones in Auburn, and basically playing a virtual road game. Let's call it. That's Atlanta. That's backyard. That's less than 2 hours from Auburn. So if they can pull that off and they can navigate that schedule well, yeah, I think they've got a great shot at the playoffs. But moreover, I think they're going to be a more complete team than Arizona, so I like them to win the conference. So we both picked Washington to win the Pac-12. Now, you came up with this wrinkle this year for our previews, and this is going to be fun because we've never done this before. Like the toughest 3-game stretch of any team, in the conference. You can make arguments for a lot of them, but I'm really curious to hear what you think is the toughest 3-game stretch.
Oh, this is easy, and it's actually the toughest 4-game stretch. Okay, this is just that bad. Starting November 3rd, all right, your friends down at Oregon State play SC at home. They travel to Stanford, travel at Washington, end at home against Oregon. Ooh. So I looked at the USC, Stanford, Washington as my three-game stretch. But you throw Oregon there at the end, and that's just a kick in the teeth.
It really is. I put Oregon State on the side and Arizona State for that matter too because I didn't think either team was really going to be that good this year. So I thought every game was going to be tough. I looked at the team that I kind of felt like I was dark horsing a little bit with, which was Arizona, what their big toughest stretch was. And I look at games 5 through 7 as being real key in their season. Now they get 2 of them at home, but that road one is the third one. And it's going to be the tough one. They get USC, Cal, and then at Utah. That's 3 live defenses in a row. They're going to have to bring it, and Khalil Tate's not going to be able to do that slump thing that he had last year. Sumlin and Mazzoni, you're going to have to keep him above board. If they do that, I think Arizona can get to the end of the season in the Pac-12 South player seat. But that's going to be a tough 3-game stretch for them for sure. Dude, can we just talk about the plethora of offensive studs at the quarterback position that the Pac-12 has? Ross Bowers at California, Manny Wilkins at Arizona State, Steven Montez at Colorado, Jake Browning at Washington, Justin Herbert at Oregon, Khalil Tate at Arizona, and if you believe what people are saying, KJ Costello is going to be good at Stanford. Holy cow, man, this league is loaded at quarterback.
It is, and I think we've always seen the Pac-12 as kind of a quarterback league. They've seemed to be a little more wide open on the offense. Not necessarily like a spread, but it just seems like they throw the ball more. There's more offense in that conference, less defense. And, let's be honest, it's a great place to play. Who doesn't want to go play football in California as opposed to going to Columbus, Ohio, or, Athens, Georgia, where it's 1,000,000 degrees to start the season.
Hey, I don't know about that, man. Those guys pull in recruits like it's candy at a Halloween concert or something. Those two, you name 2 teams that are consistently in the top 5 of recruiting. That's the other thing is none of these teams outside of maybe SC ever get a lot of that big recruiting buzz. These are places where they take 3s and turn them into 4s and 5s. In terms of star ratings. But just that quarterback move, I didn't even mention the running backs. Stephen Carr, you got Bryce Love at Stanford, you got Myles Gaskin at Washington. Offense is all over this league. Outside of the Huskies, though, who have Greg Gaines stepping in for Vita Vea, knows he's going to be great. And then 3 DBs, Miles Brandt, Taylor Rapp, Byron Murphy, all great. Probably the best defensive backs in the country. Outside of that, though, man, I don't know. Defense in this league, there's not like a bunch of stars. There may be good units, but they don't have the name guys like they do on offense, I don't think.
No, you got Cameron Smith, the linebacker out of SC that people expect a lot out of. He had a good season last year. But no, it's not like when you step into maybe the Big Ten or the SEC and some of your premier guys are defensive guys. Just to kind of sidebar, they announced who was going to the SEC media days, and there were several teams sending 2 defensive players where you think a lot of people would send offensive players.
Yeah, that's true. That's good. We should mention Lorenzo Burns out of Stanford, too, is returning leader in interceptions. He had 5 last year, so he's not bad. I mean, again, there's good players. You mentioned Cameron Smith; he's a good one. The returning leading tackler is a guy from Arizona State. I didn't realize they tackled anybody, but apparently they did.
I think when you're on the field for 100 plays a game, you end up with a lot of tackles.
This is
mathematically.
True. Yeah, Christian Sam's math is playing good for him, but that's going to be the fun thing to watch, man. And there's some good games. Is there any? We picked through each team's schedules and stuff like that, but any games on the Pac-12 schedule that you think besides Auburn and Washington to open up the season, what are some other ones you think, take a look at that one. Keep an eye on that.
Well, I mean, I think October 13, Washington heading to Oregon is a very interesting game. It's kind of in the middle of the season. You're going to know what teams are what. Honestly, Washington's going to have a wee bit of a cakewalk before they get to Oregon after the Auburn game. So I think that'll be their next big test and their first big test in conference. So that's one I'll look forward to. And always the Stanford-Washington game on November 3rd. That's a big one. In my mind, that one's for the division. You have it the other way around. But I think those are two great games to watch. And I also think the USC-Arizona game will be a fun game to watch.
I agree. I'm going to tell you what, two games, if you're a Pac-12 fan, you might want to skip, and that's September the 8th. Michigan State is coming to Tempe to take on Arizona State. That is going to get ugly. That is going to be really bad. And then UCLA that same day goes to Oklahoma. That is also going to be very ugly for them. I don't think that's going to work out well for either of the Pac-12 schools. I can see them both losing by double digits.
Well, and I think they also have one of the more unwatchable games this year, Washington State at Oregon State in early October.
I am going to rival that there's a Big 12, Big 10 matchup that is going to beat that, my friend. But we'll come to that later on.
Well, everybody knows that.
Yeah, but no, you're not wrong. I don't know. That might be fun, though, because you got two teams that got absolutely nothing to lose. So, and look, say what you will. Even when Leach's teams are bad, they're still wildly entertaining, man, because they're going to throw it all over the place. So.
Well, let me ask you this. How bad does Ohio State beat Oregon State to open the season?
Oh, is that even there was another podcast, the College Football Bros, and they had a great online scenario that if you could bet that Ohio State would win that game, you get $10 million, but if they lose, you die. And overwhelmingly, people took the $10 million. I mean, I got to tell you, man, I mean, I know there's always that sliver of hope, whatever. Dude, that would be the upset of all upsets. I just cannot see. Just from a logistical standpoint, the numbers don't even make sense. Ohio State is so friggin' loaded. Unless they just completely get dysentery for 3 ranks, I can't see them losing that.
Or, if the bus breaks down on the way to the stadium,
even if the entire
defense
if they had to jog to the stadium, I think they could still do pretty good.
Yeah, that one's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, that's a beating waiting to happen. Yeah, there's some tough out of conference. But you know what? Kudos to the Pac-12 for scheduling some good out of conference. And, we're going to get into it deeper again. But that Washington-Auburn game, that's going to be a lot of fun. They don't play very often. And when they do, it's usually a pretty good game. Matter of fact, I think it's been 10 or 15 years since they've laced up against each other, maybe longer. But coming down to the Deep South, that's a huge trip for them. They know what it means. That's a huge game. Again, we're going to get into that one later on. But that about wraps up my thoughts on the Pac-12, man. Anything else out there you want to throw out there for the folks?
Well, I mean, I think, the Pac-12 will be interesting. I probably don't get to watch as much Pac-12 football as I used to because I had to become an adult and I had to go to bed at a decent hour and all that fun stuff. But you know what? It is some exciting football out there. And I think watching Washington will be a pleasure all year long. I think they are a really good team. And they'll be a good team to keep an eye out of. But you know what? Let's get some wins, Pac-12. Let's not go 1-8 in a bowl game. If they have a really bad season, it's going to really hurt Washington and their chances to make the playoffs. But it'll be a good season. I expect at least 2, if not 3 coaches to be fired out of this conference by the end of the year. So we'll see if I'm right, Jay.
I think there's only going to be one coach with the chance of being canned at the end of the year, and he's in Pullman. I think Washington State might break off leads if things go sideways, but everybody else I think gets at least one more year to pass through. And that doesn't mean somebody's not going to get pulled either. Justin Wilcox has a good year, might get another job. Who knows?
Well, let me ask you this: Do you think Bryce Love has the juice being out there on the West Coast to win the Heisman this year?
No, I don't. I think it's for that reason, and also I think because we've seen this even with Stanford backs. Monstrous year. Next year takes a little bit of a step back, and you just feel like, oh, what happened to that guy? And he still runs for 2,000 yards. He just doesn't do all the explosion that they had, especially if Costello does come along. They're going to be more balanced on offense. So I don't know. I mean, I think Stanford would have to be in the national championship hunt. I'll be honest with you. The guys that I think have the best shot at getting invited to New York, honestly, are Justin Herbert from Oregon, because I think he's going to light the scoreboard up, and Khalil Tate from Arizona. They're the kind of players in a year where there doesn't seem to be a dominant player on one of the quote dominant teams. Maybe those are guys that could get in, but no, I don't know. I mean, Bryce Love might get invited. Maybe he probably should be invited again because he was runner-up last year. But it's funny about Heisman. You runner-up one year, and the next year it's like you don't exist. And so I don't know. They're going to have to win some major games and be in the title hunt.
I am about to say blasphemy. I think the Heisman Foundation owes Stanford one because I will be honest and transparent. Mark Ingram's Heisman deserves to be on Toby Gerhardt's mantle.
Well, there's a lot of Heismans that deserve to be other people's mantles back in the day, but that's another story for another day. For the Pac-12, though, here's the thing, and I think you're right. That bowl record, people are going to hold that over them, all that stuff. I think, the number of playmakers that they've got that could be really exciting and kind of highlight real type guys might keep that conference in the news more, and that's going to help a team like Washington that's going to make a run, or if it's Stanford or whoever. But since we both picked Washington, we'll just use them for the example. They need the other teams to do well too, and I think they can get that because there's enough excitement around the conference. I think they're going to be a lot better this year, and I'm looking forward to catching some Pac-12 football just as you are. So, well, man, that's going to wrap up our Pac-12 preview. Next week, Alan, we're going to be back, and it's time to talk about the Big Ten. Are you excited? I know that's your favorite conference.
Oh, yes, I'm so excited. Do we have a segment devoted to Jim Harbaugh and his khakis?
No, but we will have a guest on from the Detroit, Michigan area. So you can talk all about that. Our buddy Roger from Sports Radio Detroit is going to join us for a few minutes to talk Big Ten football, and then you and I will get into it just like we did here with the Pac-12. But hey, folks, we are just getting started here on the Gridiron Breakdown. Thanks for joining us again. You can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. We're on Spreaker and on Facebook. Search for BTB Podcast Entertainment. That's also the YouTube channel. Glad to be a part of that group where you can hear the Weekly Suplex. You can hear the Gridiron Breakdown. You also hear the Pre-Snap Judgment NFL show later this season as well. Glad to be a part of that. BTB Entertainment. Search for it on Facebook and YouTube. Search for the Gridiron Breakdown on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher, and you'll see the latest feed. Subscribe. Let us know what you think of the show. We appreciate the support. Until next time, for Alan, I'm Jay. You've been listening to the Gridiron Breakdown.
Thank you for listening to the Gridiron Breakdown. Tune in next week for another show. The information discussed in the Gridiron Breakdown is for entertainment purposes only and is not officially connected to the NCAA or any other college football teams discussed.